Welcome to module number 11 of the Intermediate English Spanish Translation class. And we begin with today's life's principle. Oh, it comes from a Frenchman, Victor Hugo. The word is the verb, and the verb is God. Now, you may think that he was a theologian. He was not. He was a writer. But he understood this truth. The word is the verb, and the verb is God. Today, we're going to be talking about verbs. So that's why I'm introducing the class with this great principle. Now, today's saying, a word and a stone let go cannot be called back. In other words, you throw a stone, you cannot get it back. It's already gone. Same with a word. Once you speak out, that word you cannot retrieve. It's a great, great principle or proverb. Now, in Spanish, we say palabra y piedra suelta no tienen vuelta. Of course, it has to rhyme. You know how Spanish is. Palabra y piedra suelta no tienen vuelta. All right, what about today's expression? A word to the wise. You heard that one before? You're just talking and you say, and listen, a word to the wise. Get ready to hear what I'm about to say. How you say that in Spanish? Un consejo. That's all. Un consejo. And then you expect the other person to pay attention as you give whatever consejo you're getting ready to share. A word to the wise. Here's an example. Do not visit this neighborhood alone after dark. Okay? Antes de irte, un consejo. No camines sola por allí cuando anochece. All right? Finally, today's phrase, word of mouth. Word of mouth. How you say that in Spanish? Boca a boca o boca en boca. Like the word of mouth is the best advertisement venue. Lo que se anuncia boca a boca es la mejor técnica de anunciarse. Word of mouth advertising is not always reliable. Again, that's just an example. La publicidad boca a boca no siempre es confiable. All right. An important announcement. I will be sending you translation homework number 6 right after the class, and it will be due by midnight this Saturday. I trust that you had a good break, and now it's time to get back to work. And Maria Cristina shared another one here, said voz a voz, de voz a voz. There you go. All right. Today, I am pleased and humble to introduce a topic that is very close to my heart. Logos incarnate, coming from Latin. Logos incarnate, which in English it will be the word made flesh. And of course, we're going to be talking about the verb today. But I went ahead and sent you a handout. And in the handout, basically, this is what you see. It's taken from John chapter 1, verse 1 and verse 14. And it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And then verse 14, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we saw his glory, glory as to the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. So what are we talking about here? In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. It tells you in the next statement, and the Word was God. So we're talking about God. But then, as we read on, he said that that Word, which is God, became flesh. So who is that? That's God's Son, Jesus himself. And then he dwelt among us, and we saw his glory, glory as of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. Now, the important or fascinating part of this is that it equates God with word. Word. Now, if you look at it in Spanish, it doesn't use the word palabra. It uses the word verb. And I began to ask experts why in Spanish it's not translated as palabra instead of instead of verb or verbo. And the experts tell me at least two reasons why. Number one, in Latin, the word for word is verbum. Verbum. And since Spanish is so close to Latin, the linguistic experts decided to use the word verbo instead of palabra. Because in Greek it's logos, which is palabra. And then the other one, which makes sense to me, is since it is talking about Jesus and Jesus was a man, verbo being masculine fits better in the gender because palabra is feminine. So as I look at it, I go, it makes sense. First of all, verbum is the same as word, and then it is a masculine noun because, as you know, in Spanish, you have to consider the gender. And since Jesus was a man, then it fits with using a masculine adjective because you couldn't say palabro. So it has to be a masculine equivalent, which is verbo. So in Spanish it says, en el principio era el verbo, y el verbo era con Dios, y el verbo era Dios. And then when you jump to verse 14, y aquel verbo fue hecho carne, y habitó entre nosotros, y vimos su gloria, gloria como del unigénito Hijo del Padre, lleno de gracia y verdad. So there you have it. As we move on and take a closer look at it, we go back to the Greek, which is logos. Again, logos meaning word. But the word logos is word in general. It's not specifically talking about a noun, about an adjective, or any other part of speech. It's just general, the word, as in, I give you my word. In other words, I give you my promise that I'm going to do whatever I said I'm going to do. is a general word for word. Now, it is a verbal noun in the nominative masculine singular in Greek. In Greek, it's masculine. See? So it fits very well in Greek. Again, it is a noun, but it's considered a verbal noun. Nominative means that it is a subject. It is masculine and it is in the singular. And it comes from the Greek word lego, which means something said, something reasoned, or calculated. Now, the English meaning of it, of course, is word, expression, argument, and action. So think about it. When Jesus is equated to logos, it is an expression, the expression of God the Father. An argument, there's reasoning in it. It is not just fantasy. And then, of course, there's action. It is an action. And that, again, supports the word in Spanish verbo, because verbo implies action. Again, the Spanish meaning for logos will be verbo, palabra, lógica, acción. So think about it when you think about Jesus. Would that fit him? Of course, it does. Now, logos, as I said already, is the word for word in a general sense, as opposed to a specific word like an adjective or an adverb. In Greek, we have other words that are specific for word. But that's not the one that is being used here. Its specific meaning, that is the meaning of the word logos, is always considered within the text. So it's contextual. In St. John's statement that we read earlier, it is equivalent to divine expression. So there you go. In the beginning was the Word. It is in the beginning was the divine expression of God, which is God the Son, Jesus himself. It is just fascinating when you begin to think and study why the word logos was used. So that brings us to logos incarnate, which is verse 14 that we read, because the word became flesh. The logos is incarnated, and you know that happens during Christmas. We celebrate that, the incarnation, when God was born as baby Jesus. The logos is God. We already determined that. The logos is the creator, because he says all things were created by him and for him. En el principio era el verbo y el verbo era con Dios y el verbo era Dios. Este era en el principio con Dios. Todas las cosas fueron hechas por él. En otras palabras, él es el creador. And then the Logos, as we know, became flesh and lived among us on earth. Why? Because his main plan was to live a sinless life and then become the sacrifice for our sins. So that's why he let people kill him, crucified, so he could shed his blood in the payment for our sins. But he didn't remain dead. He arose. And we are getting close to celebrating that, as that we call Easter, the resurrection. Without the resurrection, nothing else will be of any avail. But because of the resurrection, that's the power that everything else he said and did is really true. So the logical inference, the conclusion is whatever God does is never disconnected from what he says. So let me say that again. Whatever God does is never disconnected from what he says, because the word is so close to his being. So speaking, uttering, just giving out speech is so close, intimately close to his being. So whatever God does is very close connected to what he says. A very important truth to own and to live by. All right. That's the end of today's introduction, which brings us to the Spanish language as we consider verbs. But before I go on, any questions about what we just covered? It's just something that you don't hear every day, because we don't learn that in school anymore or in universities. And it's so fundamental to everything and every knowledge. I've been teaching sciences this week, but everything is connected to this great truth. The fact that God speaks words. Words are connected to his being. And as we approach the topic of verbs, let's keep that in mind. How we have a God that is the God of the Word. The God of the Word. Therefore, we should safeguard language, because language is part of God. God invented language, and he expresses himself through language. Let's make sure that we always not only know that, but defend language, which I don't know if you know it, but it's being attacked tremendously. Everything is being attacked, but language is being attacked tremendously. And we need to understand that, because God is the God of the Word. All right, let's look at verbs. Verbos. As we look at verbs, it's important that we understand the three different moods that we have, both in English and Spanish. We have the indicative, the imperative, and the subjunctive. And I'm sharing something with you now that was shared with me when I was a student of the Greek language by the Greek professor. And when he said it, I said, now I understand the relationship between the indicative, the imperative, and the subjunctive. The indicative deals with reality. Like, I am in Charlotte right now. That's indicative. But the imperative is less real than the indicative, because the imperative is when you give someone a command. You say, could you go and bring me a glass of water? You see, that's less real that I am drinking a glass of water. Because as you give a command, it still not become reality. So commands, which is the imperative, are honestly less real than the indicative. And then the least real is the subjunctive, which is, I wish I had a glass of water. That's even less real than the imperative. Because I wish is not even into the command or into the action of me getting a glass of water. So look at it, take a step back, and then look at it. Indicative is real, imperative is less real, and then the subjunctive is least real. Now, the subjunctive is so important, specifically in Spanish. And it is important that we master the subjunctive, because in Spanish, a lot of it is about least real. If you are honest with yourself. So keep that in mind. Hint, hint. The subjunctive is the one that you really need to work on it. And we are going to be working on it very hard in this class. Well, we have already begun. We have already begun. Vamos a mirar los tiempos de los verbos. Así que vamos a hablar bastante español ahora. ¿Cuáles son los tiempos? Bueno, en general, pasado, presente y futuro, ¿verdad? Pero somos más específicos aquí. Tenemos el infinitivo. El infinitivo es el que termina en ar, o ir. Tenemos el gerundio, que es el que tiene acción continua. Por ejemplo, otra vez, hablando de tomar agua, tomar sería infinitivo. Estoy tomando sería el gerundio o el participio presente. Y tenemos también el participio pasado. Yo estaba tomando agua. Así que aquí les estoy compartiendo un cartelón importantísimo que nos ayuda a ver la perspectiva eh, de lo que es los diferentes modos. Pero estamos mirando todo en el indicativo primero. En el modo indicativo comenzamos con el presente indicativo, el imperfecto indicativo, el pretérito indefinido, el futuro imperfecto, el pretérito perfecto de indicativo, el pluscuamperfecto de indicativo, el pretérito anterior y el futuro perfecto y compuesto. You go, do I need to learn all of that? Honestly, you don't. What you need to learn is to translate it accordingly, because you're not going to be tested on this. This is not going to be part of the certification exam, but I need to give it to you so I can classify it correctly. What you need to know is be able to apply it when you translate. All right? But meanwhile, I'm giving it to you by assigning its proper title and subtitles. And here again, we're talking about the indicative, the reality one. All right. So we begin. Again, we are still in the indicative, and we're going to be in the indicative for a little while. Hablamos del modo potencial o condicional, donde tenemos el potencial simple, el potencial compuesto o el ante-post-pretérito. You say, okay, Dr. Gonzalez, I'd like to see examples so I can learn it. I will give you examples. I'm just giving you a quick introduction first. All right? Now let's look at the imperative mode. El modo imperativo. Este no es tan complicado porque solamente se usa en la segunda persona. Cuando uno le pide a alguien que haga algo, siempre en la segunda persona. Tú, usted, tráigame un vaso de agua en singular. O si no, en plural, ustedes, todos ustedes, tráiganme un vaso de agua. Así que siempre es en la segunda persona, singular o plural, cuando usamos el imperativo. Pero no solo. Yo podría incluirme a mí también en un imperativo. Cuando digo, vamos, vamos todos a tomar un vaso de agua. También eso es imperativo, aunque no es tan directo, pero estoy dirigiendo a otros a hacer algo que es imperativo. Y por último, el modo subjuntivo. Ahí tenemos el presente de subjuntivo, el imperfecto de subjuntivo, el pluscuamperfecto de subjuntivo, el pretérito perfecto de subjuntivo. También tenemos el futuro subjuntivo y el futuro perfecto de subjuntivo que no se usa mucho. Mire lo que dice ahí debajo de la primera estrella. El futuro subjuntivo se usa poco en Latinoamérica y se ha reemplazado con el presente de subjuntivo o el presente de indicativo. Y en cuanto al futuro perfecto de subjuntivo, se usa poco en Latinoamérica y se ha reemplazado con el futuro perfecto de indicativo o el pretérito perfecto de subjuntivo. Todo esto va a tener más sentido cuando comencemos a ver los ejemplos. Otra vez, esto es solo una introducción rápida, como si fuera el título de la película, para que luego veamos uno por uno en detalle. All right. Para poder estudiar esto, les estoy dando tres verbos modelos y escogí un verbo que termine en ar, otro que termine en er y otro que termine en ir. Amar, que es un verbo regular, creer, que es un verbo irregular, y recibir, que es un verbo regular. Les voy a dar una tarea que no tienen que entregar. Es una tarea para que usted mismo lo aprenda. Y la tarea es conjugar cada uno de estos verbos. Y para ayudarles, le estoy dando aquí un sitio en el internet que se llama conjugación.es, donde usted va a encontrar la conjugación de cada uno de estos verbos y muchos más. Pero quiero que usted escoja estos tres verbos como modelos para que luego pueda aprender a conjugar otros verbos. Y allí está en conjugación.es. Así que es una tarea que no tiene que entregar, pero que sí la debe hacer para que pueda de verdad, ver ejemplos de conjugaciones en estos tres verbos. No se olvide, por favor, de hacerlo. ¿Ok? Pero es algo divertido y no es tan tedioso, porque lo que tiene que hacer es buscarlo, copiarlo y pegarlo a, say, a Word document, y ahí tiene toda la conjugación de amar en los tres modos, en el indicativo, en el imperativo y en el subjuntivo. Y luego otro con lo mismo, pero con creer y lo mismo con recibir. Al usted hacer eso, va a estar bien preparado para entender la lección. Así que asegúrese de hacer eso. Muy bien. Today's class is going to be short because I want you to take time now to go back to conjugación.es. Again, go and then type amar. And then find the conjugation for amar. Copy it and paste it on a Word document. And then you have that as a pattern to conjugate every regular verb that ends in ar. Again, indicative, imperative, and subjunctive. If you don't do that, you're going to be lost in the rest of the classes. So you want to do it. And right now, it is 7:04. Now we're supposed to be in class until 8:30. So you have about an hour and a half to do this. And you can do it in much, much less. You can do it in about half an hour. Do the same for creer. Again, in the indicative, imperative, and subjunctive. And then finally do it for recibir. And as you look at that, you will be able to begin to manage Spanish verbs as we continue with all the great variety that we have as we conjugate the verbs. Because when you come back, we're going to be talking about the specifics that we spoke about all of this, specifically the indicative. All of those, presente, imperfecto, pretérito indefinido, all of those. And then we're going to do the potencial, again in the indicative. And then we're going to go to the imperative. And then finally the subjunctive. So you need to do that preparation so you can then follow the class. Any question? Again, you don't have to turn it in. It's for you to exercise yourself as you conjugate the verbs. Questions? All right, my dear friends, I'm going to let you go so you can begin that important assignment. Meanwhile, I'll be sending you an email in a few minutes with your homework, translation homework number 6, which you don't want to rush, but at least you'll have it already tonight. God bless you. I'm looking forward to this class. We're going to be learning a lot. And above all, we are going to apply it in translation. You have a good night and wait for my email as I send it to you in a few minutes. Bye now.